What's up, guys? This is MMAsherdog for BluffTheSpot. I'm going to review my top 10 biggest hands ever online today. There will be a second part to this video series, so stay tuned. So it's 200, 400 no limit. I think it was just a regular table, so you can buy in for max 40k. So we have Vice Corvin, who is an old school Swedish reg, who doesn't play too much online. We've got OTB, who is the GOAT of No Limit Hold'em. We've got Vegetto89, who is a good player as well, a Spanish player. He also doesn't play too much anymore nowadays, but back then he was playing every day. Chao Ren is an online poker legend. He's been around since the early 2000s, I think. And Aaron, I actually played with Aaron last year in Vegas in a 200, 400, 800 session, but at the time I didn't know it was him. He's a Chinese player who's actually pretty good. So here we have a big one. So Aaron opens to 1100. Vice Corvin folds. So at the time, this was 3 years ago. I was always three betting 9-8 suited. I'd seen that this guy had been way too loose, also folding a lot of 3-bets and also just being quite tight. So I decided to 3-bet here. I would say nowadays I would just end up folding. I think this is a little bit too loose, but under the right circumstances, right? I mean, if he's opening 40% in the cutoff, that's almost a button range, right? Or let's say he's over folding, he doesn't 4-bet, or he just makes mistakes, then it might make sense to 3-bet here. But yeah, this is normally too loose, I would say. Okay, he calls. And we get a 10-10-4 flop. This flop is not necessarily really good for us, but it's also not bad for us. But remember, we have all the queens plus, and he probably doesn't. So, we have 10-9 suited, Jack-10 suited, etc. He probably does too. So, yeah, this board doesn't change too much. We both have some flush draws. Pocket fours, if anything, he's got more often than we do. So, I think we can still be quite aggressive here. And we can bet this board quite often. So 9-7, we have no showdown value and a flush draw. So this is generally a good hand to be betting with. I would have liked a slightly larger sizing nowadays, but again, this was 3 years ago. So if you see me make a questionable play, that's probably partially because the metagame back then was different, and we just had less knowledge of the game. So when you see like high stakes poker hands, I try not to shit on people because they played those hands 10, 15 years ago, right? So had we played back then, we would have also been way worse. Anyway, Aaron calls, and the pot is already quite big. It's already 13k. So we get the ace, which is a great card for us. Obviously, we're going to have more hands like aces, ace king, ace queen, whatever. He will have a bunch of those too, but we're going to have hit it more often. So I think we can be quite aggressive here. We unblock hands like, for instance, queen jack of hearts that just have to fold now. Again, we really desire fold equity, so you could check here sometimes, but I think in this specific situation, betting is often the play, not always. So I bet. And you see, I don't bet too big because the pot is still quite dry, right? If the board is more wet, maybe I'll go a bit bigger. But there's really almost nothing to protect from other than the flush draw on the paired board. So we get called, and the river is a jack of clubs. So, honestly, I remember what I was thinking. I was like, I'm actually not that happy. I was actually debating a check call. I mean, obviously, I'm never check folding. I was debating a check call versus a shove, right? Because I think he can have some hands like, for instance, ace high flush draws that now have an ace high flush. He can self pocket jacks maybe. He can have hands like king queen of diamonds, clubs, sorry. He can self some random full houses like maybe jack 10, ace 10, pocket 4. So when I shove here, I'm not getting called by that many worse hands, to be honest, because it's unlikely as a lower flush. So he has to mostly call me with a 10 or with a hand like ace king or ace queen. So in the end, I decided it was very, very close. Checking, what does that accomplish? Well, if you have a hand like ace king, maybe you want to check as well here, right? So you don't always want to check fold. So you're checking like a weaker flush here might make sense, hoping he turns a hand into a bluff like, what does he turn into a bluff here? It's actually hard to say because if he has an ace, he's not bluffing. If he has a jack, well, if he has jacks, he's obviously value raising, right? So, or value betting. And I don't think he's just floating the queen jack of hearts on the turn either. So he would have to make like a thin call on the turn with like 4 or 5 suited, let's say, and to then turn it into a bluff, or make like a thin call with a hand like, well, king queen even got it straight. So he can turn hands like, pocket eights, etc. into a bluff. But he's not going to have them too often, right? Because he's probably just folding them on the turn. So it's not that easy for him to come up with bluffs, to be honest. And I think if he does have a hand like, for instance, ace 4 hearts, he should just check down. Probably, probably lose, but sometimes win. He could, of course, value shove a 10 once I check, and I do beat those. So I ended up shoving, pretty close, but I went for it. And he called within like 5 seconds. I was like, oh shit, he probably just has like, a bigger flush or something like that. Like for instance, ace queen of clubs, ace 5 of clubs. But he showed up with ace king, and I won a big one. So that was pretty nice. So as for his play, ace king is sometimes a 4-bet, sometimes a call, so don't really mind that. Obviously easy flop call with the showdown value, the overcards, etc. Turn easy call. On the river, it's kind of the same, He's kind of got the same conundrum where I'm not bluffing with that many hands, right? Because king queen got there, the flush got there. If I have hands like ace king, obviously, I would have hands like ace queen beat. So I would have to turn a hand like queen jack, for instance, into a bluff. I would have to have a hand like 5-4 suited, let's say, to turn into a bluff. It wouldn't be that easy to find bluffs. So I think his call is quite loose, but it's okay, If you were to put this in a solver, it'd probably say side call. Well, solvers only call or fold. They don't side call, but if anything, you should side call this one. So yeah. Now we should rate the play. My play, I would say 7 out of 10. The 3-bet is questionable. Even shoving the river, it's fine. But again, I should even consider a check call. I could even consider a turn check. So I think I just had low EV on every single street, but I happened to win the maximum. I think his play is a 7.5 out of 10. So yeah. So this hand was played versus other opponents entirely. So we have Gas Trader, who's Bill Perkins, a rich businessman who nowadays is actually quite a good poker player. Back then he was significantly worse, but he's made a lot of improvements. So I know he still plays sometimes. He's a decent player. We have Proto, who is a friend of mine, also a Dutch reg. Probeers, who mostly plays tournaments, I think, nowadays. Zergok, who is a bit of a newer reg. And 2607, 1985 is Vogelsang. So Bill Perkins opens. As I said, at the time he wasn't playing as great as he does now. So I 3-bet him. Basically, he was open raising too many hands. He wasn't folding the 3-bets. He was, making he was making like funny moves. So I want to isolate him. So he's obviously not going to fold very often. And then, I'm in position with a range advantage, hopefully with a skill advantage as well. Everyone folds. And he 4-bets quite big. And normally you would say this is a fold, right? But back then, I remember, I think he was opening like 45 to 50% in this position. He was 4-betting every hand and folding and whatever. So normally this is just an easy fold. But with as much money in there as there was, with the crazy dynamic of just attacking each other, I decided to go all in. And I remember he was tanking for like, 10 seconds, which is always weird, right? When people 4-bet, as in like, you have aces, you call, right? You 4-bet ace queen offsuit or whatever, you 4-bet some kind of bluff, you fold. Like, what is it to think about? It was a bit funny. But then he called after like 10 seconds, and I'm like, oh shit, maybe he has like ace king or something, he's thinking about it. Or he has like ace queen suited or something. I really hope he doesn't have like 10s. And he calls. Obviously, the guy's too rich to run it once, to run it twice, even though it's a $96,000 pot. And we get this board. Not so good. Ooh, hope. No. And he has ace-deuce offsuit. And I lost that one. So, yeah, that was unfortunate. And then less than 5 minutes later, we played this hand. So at this point, I see, okay, he's 4-bet calling with some very questionable hands. So I'm going to attack him, obviously. Min raise again. I mean, against a 40 to 50% range in position with ace-queen, we got the nuts, right? So I size up a bit, trying to get extra value here. So I like my decision so far. And he just ships outright. And this could include ace-king, this range. That kind of sucks, right? If he has ace-king, we have 30%. But, if he's 4-betting, like monkeying around with hands like ace-deuce, he's probably shipping pairs. He's probably shipping hands like ace-jack offsuit and whatever, just random stuff. I remember seeing him shipping queen-jack of hearts, like snap shipping as well. We're doing, we have 70% against that hand. So, I mean, obviously we could be behind, but we need 46% equity. And I think we have a bit over 50, to be honest. So, it's a high variance play, but if it's plus EV, you got to make the play, right? Otherwise, you should not be in the game. As you see, we're also playing quite deep. This was a deep stack table. You could buy in for like 100k. So Invoker, Linus, and I all bought in for 100, especially because we have a good position. Still not looking good. Queen Jack. Oh, no, not Queen Jack. What are we hoping for? I don't even know at this point. Yeah, split? No, no chance. So there was some hope on the turn, but not much, and then we lost that one as well. What are you gonna do, right? So we have Invoker in the game. We have Muha84, who's an old school reg, who doesn't play much anymore, but yeah, he was one of the top dogs back like 5-6 years ago. So I open 8, 2.5x. Scarface 3-bets me. We're really deep, actually. This is actually not always a call, but back then, literally nobody's folding this hand to a 3-bet. It's not as if this is a big mistake or anything. He c-bets small on the flop, and this is actually quite close because on the one hand, he's giving me a good price. On the other hand, I'm out of position with a hand that cannot really win the pot unless we bink our 8, right? So it's actually a really ugly spot. Even if he has a hand like ace-king or king-queen, he can so easily push us off our hand. So it's a really, you know, a shitty spot in general. That's why these pairs don't play so well. You know, you either fast play them generally or you tend to fold them if they miss. As I said, it's all quite close. I would say check raising is the worst option, but the EV between call and fold is pretty similar. Well, what do you know? You just turned. We just turned the full house, right? So, actually, if we're all in, I'm probably gonna lose, given that he can have 7s and jacks and 10 on a spade. So he tends to check. He checks behind, so he can still have good hands like, you know, ace jack suited or king jack suited or over pairs or whatever. Maybe even checks back stronger, like he checks back like jacks or stuff like that, or a flush. So it's a card he should be checking behind on quite often. And on the river, I was thinking at the time, like, do I want to ever overbet in this spot? And I think the answer is yes. Obviously not so often, but I think we should sometimes overbet. And obviously, if there's one hand you want to overbet here, it's this one, right? Because, you know, we have a full house. It's more likely now is an overpair plus spade or a jack or something. So yeah, I was thinking if I ever want to overbet here, this is like the very best hand to do it with, right? Like this one. Pocket 5s would be good as well, but do we really have that to get to the river with? Probably not. So yeah, I decided to overbet this hand. We can bluff in hands like, for instance, ace king with a spade, etc. A couple other hands. And he calls. And jack 10. So he's thinking, well, maybe I still value bet this sizing with a straight. So he blocks that. He also blocks my pocket jacks. So he's thinking, well, unless this guy's the big flush or something, or like quad 7s or 7-8s, he's probably bluffing. So I think his call is all right. I think my play is all right. I would say my play is like 7.5 out of 10. His play is 7.5 out of 10 as well. So, you know, it was not a sick play by either one of us. I just happened to win it. So right here, we're super deep, almost 300 big blinds deep. I raised 2.5x. Invoker 3-bets here. And I think I should sometimes 4-bet my hand, but calling also happens quite often. In position, you don't have to 4-bet as aggressively as out of position. So he 3-bets on the larger side. I decided to call this time. Definitely okay. And he bets kind of a weird sizing, a little bit over 40% pot. We block aces, we block kings, we unblock all of his random 10-9 suited bluffs. And even if he has jacks, we have outs. So easy call. I don't think we need to do a ton of raising here. We probably have more 8s than he does. We definitely pocket deuces more than he does, but we don't have a big advantage here. And he decides to bet again for 14k into around 20, which is a fine sizing to me. I like the sizing. And this one is quite close, right? Like, again, we unblock hands like 4-5, 5-6, you know, hands like jack 10 of diamonds, etc. But he can also value bet jacks here. So it's quite close. I decided to call this time. And the river's a king. Obviously, if you were bet river, you know, maybe he still value bets hands like, you know, jacks or queens. Maybe he has a king jack suited that he value bets. Again, we unblock all of his bluffs. So if he bets, let's say 35k, We just have to call. He can also value bet ace king. We block aces, so we block ace 8 suited if he ever has that. I don't think he was 3-betting that back then, but you know, it's a free roll. So he checks, and here on the river, I decide to bet about half pot here. I'm trying to put him in a tough spot if he has a hand like, for instance, king 10 suited, queens, jacks, 10s. Maybe he has some kind of ace 3 suited type of strange hand. So yeah, I don't think I need to go huge here. We could go huge, but not with this hand, right? Maybe if you want to go huge, maybe pocket 3s or something. Also, it's not that easy to find a lot of bluffs. You know, we'll have some hands like 4-5 suited ourselves, or like ace 4 of diamonds. Maybe we'll have like, you know, like a queen jack of diamonds sometimes. Maybe we want to bluff like an ace off flush draw sometimes. So we'll have a few bluffs. Maybe we have a hand like ace queen occasionally that we want to, you know, float light and then turn into a bluff. So we'll have some bluffs, but not like an insane amount of bluffs. So we don't need to go too crazy here. I think this bet size is plenty. And he folds, so I don't know what he has, but you know, even though the pot is not that special, just bet, check, fold. You know, it's still near 50k pot. These were 5 of my top 10 biggest hands in online poker. Stay tuned for part 2 for more nosebleeds action. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out our website, BluffTheSpot.com, for the Black Friday sale. Good luck.